a very warm welcome to a special episode. I'm at the Meta's new sprawling 1.3 lakh square feet office, and this is in Gurgaon. As we all know, Facebook has been rebranded as Meta, so I'm here to have a candid conversation with Facebook's most successful, longest running India CEO, Ajit Mohan, Vice President and Managing Director of now what's called Meta. Well, lovely to meet you, Ajit. Truly a pleasure meeting you in person after a while, and many congratulations on this sprawling 1.3 lakh square feet property. I believe this is the first standalone campus in Asia.
That's right.
Yeah.
And great to be here, Sonali. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So talk to me about, when you thought of building this office, the need to have a standalone campus in Asia. Why was this location chosen? And, what's buzzing within that Meta office?
I think over the last few years, Sonali, we have been really leaning in on India, really thinking of this as a big, important country for us. And we have been expanding our teams. And Gurgaon is where our largest team is. And we thought it was the right time for us to build a space that houses this team. It houses our teams across Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, across all of our functions. And I think in the context of the company's transition to Meta,
Sure.
it's also a great opportunity for us to engage with the communities outside as we make this pivot to shaping what the metaverse will become in the next 5 and 10 years.
Yeah, glad you brought up the terms Meta, metaverse. I want you to dumb it down for people like me and my viewers in terms of why was the need to change the name from Facebook to Meta. There's of course a lot of commentary on why the need to change. Some of it was like to, change the narrative that is going on globally about Facebook. As you know, we've discussed it many times. While it's such an inspirational company, it's also controversy's favorite child. So tell me a little bit about the name change,
Yeah.
and also a little bit about metaverse, and simplify and dumb it down for me.
We are materially, meaningfully pivoting a lot of our energy to playing a role in building the metaverse. What is the metaverse? It is the next version of the internet. It's going to be more immersive. We like to say this is an embodied form of the internet, and we believe that it will allow a more close to an in-person physical experience than what the current version of the internet has allowed us.
Okay.
We will do that by wearing a headset. Over time, it may happen not on the back of a headset that's strapped to the head. It may happen even on the back of a frame like the one that I'm wearing.
Sure.
And it allows you to engage with people who are not physically in the same space with you. It allows you to engage with spaces and experiences that are created in the virtual world, and it'll all feel a lot more embodied and immersive than how we experience the internet today. And as a company, we have made the call that we're going to invest deeply in building products and experiences to shape what the metaverse will become. Not alone. We don't think we can build this alone. Just like the internet, it'll be on the back of work that we do with others, and frankly, it'll be on the back of work that many other companies invest in. So we thought, given that we have the clarity that we are going full on in terms of our efforts, the company's identity should reflect that change. Second, I think we are also conscious that there has been a fair bit of confusion about Facebook, the company, versus Facebook, the app. And the reality is that as a company today, we are not just Facebook, the app, we are Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook Reality Labs, where a lot of the metaverse work is happening. And we thought it also made sense to articulate the clear distinction between the company and the family of apps.
There's a lot of talk about the metaverse being a completely alternate universe where I can actually buy property, I can have an alternate life, I can go to a concert to LA, although I'm sitting in Bombay or Delhi. Is that, there'll be metaverse money, currency. Is that what it's going to look like, that we all have parallel universes that we're part of?
I think it's interesting. I think the more immersive and more uh, embodied is sort of how we look at it. I think two words that you used, alternate and parallel, in some ways, if you remember when the internet was sort of exploding in the late 90s, it was thought of as, is this a parallel universe? And reality is, if you look at how it has turned out in the last 20-25 years, in many ways, it's become a big part of our everyday life.
Sure.
It was not something that existed in parallel. It transformed how we live, how we work, how we buy products and services. And therefore, I think the best way to look at this is, just like the internet transformed how we live our life, this is going to be the next version of the internet. And I would look at it not as something alternate or parallel, but as something that's continuation of us. And it's just that it allows us, whether we are engaging with friends and family, or whether we are thinking about creating spaces, or whether we are thinking about putting up products and services, all of what is going to be built around in the metaverse over the next decade will allow these experiences to be a lot more real, a lot more immersive than what the internet has allowed us to do on the phone, especially over the last 10 and 15 years.
You know, it's been a trying, 18, 19, 20 months now for all of us as companies, and of course also personally. Having said that, how has been the kind of advertiser sentiment on Facebook, given that digital got such a big thrust ever since March 2020?
I think you're absolutely right, Sonali, in calling out the duality of what's happened in the last 18, 20 months, especially in India. Earlier this year, I think we saw a lot of loss, a lot of trauma around the second wave of the pandemic. And the reality is that, as we have seen in the last few weeks, some version of the pandemic still continues everywhere in the world. And that's one part of the reality. But equally, the other part is, I do think it introduced people around the world to a more digital way of living and working. And a lot of them liked the change. So we have seen over the last 18 months growth across our platforms, Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp in India. And we have also seen that it has played a role in the pandemic. I mean, today you can book a vaccination slot on WhatsApp. You can download a vaccination certificate using WhatsApp. We saw a lot of communities organizing help during the summer outbreak, using our platforms to seek help and to find help for others. So I do think we play a material role even in the fight against the pandemic. But equally, we are seeing that it's fundamentally changing how business is conducted. And businesses of all sizes have come online. And I think it's almost become a cliche now, but when you look at the numbers, it's clearly the reality is that maybe 4 or 5 years of change, maybe a decade of change has been crunched in these last 18 months in terms of the digitization of our economy. You now have companies who are born on Instagram, who's, they may not even have a website, but they're building followership on Instagram. You're now starting to see companies leverage WhatsApp to build deep connects with customers, and of course, marketing on Facebook and Instagram. So all of that has benefited us, I think, because people are using our platforms, not just for commercial purposes, but businesses are using our platform. We are seeing a lot of energy, including in advertising. I think the numbers that we reported for the year ending March 2021 was a 40% revenue growth. And I think it's happening because fundamentally businesses realize the power of using our platform, not just to build followership, but to reach out to new customers in India as well as globally. And we are leaning in. I think a lot of our work is focused on making it easy for very small businesses, early stage entrepreneurs, to, without a lot of money, find a way to use our platform, derive value, and use the platforms to drive growth for themselves. And I think a lot of that is happening that eventually translates to revenues for the company.
Sure. I'm curious to understand from you. You said about a 40% growth for the India office. So if you look at the portfolio of products Meta hosts, what would be the kind of split in terms of who's the star, who's becoming a star,
Yeah.
who's the underdog.
The way we've built our marketing platform is agnostic to the Facebook app and Instagram. I think marketers use both seamlessly. They don't have to make conscious calls in terms of separating the use of the platform, and they're using both. I think we are now starting to see business messaging on WhatsApp and Messenger and Instagram as a new source of value for businesses that eventually will translate to revenue for us as a company as well. Okay. And Mark outlined this a couple of months ago. But today, all of it driven by, almost all of it driven by advertising on Facebook and Instagram. And I think one of the areas that we are particularly excited about, where I think we have just scratched the surface of its potential as a business driver, is Reels on Instagram. Yes, okay. I do think the story of short form in India in the last 18 months is the story of Reels on Instagram. There are more than 6 million Reels that are produced every day. We have seen Instagram go deep into India, and we have only started testing ads on Reels. And we do believe that just given the enormous amount of energy, both from people as well as and creators, we do think it's going to be a big opportunity for businesses over the next 12 and 18 months. And I think that's going to show up materially as well.
I know that this office, and over the last, ever since you've taken over, you've been big on, supporting SMEs. And I believe a lot of what is going to happen inside the Meta office here is also a lot about, fostering and fueling small businesses. So while there's a lot of attempt, unfortunately, despite the good work you do, Facebook globally seems to lack social capital. And I think this has been an ongoing problem, and I know there have been ways to try and tackle it. But, then you have whistleblowers, you have allegations of putting, profit ahead of social harm. What would be your response to it? Why is it that, the reputation management of Facebook is not getting its act together?
People at large, I think, have equity for us. They find value. Businesses find value. And yet, I think to the point that you mentioned, there has been enormous scrutiny on us as a company. I think that scrutiny is fair. I think we are a consequential platform. I think the work that we do impacts societies around the world. And therefore, I think it's totally fair that stakeholders, including governments, civil society, media, are constantly asking the question, for a company of your scale and how consequential you are you doing the right thing? And therefore, I see the scrutiny and the questions that are being asked as consistent with the role that we play in societies. Today, the prevalence of hate speech on our platform is 0.03%. The number has kept coming down over time. So it clearly shows that while we can't eliminate the ability of every bad actor to do harm, we can't ensure it's 0% of content that all of us as a society can agree is harmful. We are continuously pushing forward to that position of trying to eliminate. We don't think we are perfect, but I do think we are doing everything we can. We are doubling up on the investments, and I do think, relative to every other company in the world, I think we are leading this charter.
It's interesting you say that. So then are you then telling me that at some level you're actually very misjudged? For instance, let me give you a simple example. If you look at Facebook's founder versus Jack Dorsey, Twitter, right? I don't know why, and because of the narrative for so many years, you'll never hear people looking at Jack Dorsey as a money-minded, behemoth who's looking to just profiteer, as opposed to Zuckerberg. And there has been a problem in this imagery for a while now. So while I understand what you're saying, why is it not translating into good reputation?
I would argue, Sonali, that most people around the world see Mark as an inspiring entrepreneur who built a company that has had huge impact in the world. I think whenever we see him engaging with consumers or developers, I think they understand that what he has built is special. But at the same time, I think to your question, and I think you're pointing to the relentless scrutiny.
And the whistleblowers who seem to keep emerging, from your organization.
I think it's the context. I think it's the context of the kind of platforms that we have. We are a place that believes in the power of expression. That expression shows up in very different ways. I think we have people who work for the company who are deeply committed to the mission. And I think it all comes together when you realize that these are all consequential platforms playing a very important role in people's lives every day. And therefore, everyone is asking the question, including employees, are we doing the right thing? I must say, I think to the specific question about some of the recent disclosures on the documents,
Yeah.
a lot of it was internal research that the company had commissioned to explore how our platforms can be better, which were freely available inside the company where no one was making an effort to hide it. So I do think, the narrative sometimes has not reflected the reality of what's been happening. And even the so-called Facebook files or the Facebook papers, if you actually go through it, you will realize, for example, on Instagram and the impact it's having on younger people, a lot of the research called out that on a lot of areas, people said Instagram has positive impact. And yet, I am proud that the company is asking the question, what more can we do? I think if you were authentically doing good research, you have to ask not just what are we doing well, but also what are we doing better? And these documents were available for everyone to read. I mean, I think one of the attributes of the company internally, and every new person who walks into the company kind of is taken aback at the extreme transparency that is there internally. And in some ways, I think that's been weaponized a bit recently. But I'm proud that we continue to lean in on doing the right research. We continue to believe in the power of transparency and for people to see what the company is doing. But I also think the scrutiny will continue and must continue because we are a consequential company that has impact on societies around the world, and we should always be asking the question, both to us and people outside asking the question, are we doing the right thing?
Okay, moving gears a little bit, what are your expectations from the proposed law on personal data protection?
We are aware that it's a very live conversation. There's been a lot of media disclosures on what could be in the bill. I haven't seen the bill. I do think whenever we have had the opportunity to engage with stakeholders, whether in parliament or in government, we have articulated our position that we welcome regulation. As a company, we have firmly put privacy at the center of our agenda in a way that we may not have done in 2004. Sure. Today, the processes are set up where every feature, every product that is introduced has to cross the hurdle of does it meet the standards of privacy that we have articulated. So I do think the conversation on privacy is an important one, yeah. and we will wait to see the draft before we form a point of view on it.
But does it concern you the non-personal data part of the proposed legislation? Are those concerns you're currently grappling with?
I think that there's been so many conversations in the media, right. Sonali, but I think we should wait for a considered point of view. I know it's been a process that has involved stakeholders and discussions for a period of time. I'll wait to see a draft for us to articulate a position. But I think just as you saw when the new IT rules were introduced earlier in the year, I think we recognize that we have a shared interest here. I think we have a shared interest with the government and with Parliament in reducing harm on platforms like ours, in making it a safer experience for everyone. And therefore, I think this is a conversation that's happening not just in India, but around the world. And as a company, we engage and we want to be constructive in this process, and we continue to do that.
What is Facebook's view on, supposedly being asked to share non-personal data under, sandboxes or, with startups as directed by, governments under the proposed data privacy?
We haven't seen any asks come out, right? I think what we have seen is a lot of ideas being floated around. We haven't seen any asks come out. I do think, as Minister Chandrasekhar, who was here last week in this office, said, let's wait for the draft bill, and I think then we should have a conversation on it.
You've been successfully running the Meta India office for a while, and also the first managing director who's got some real powers. What would you say is your biggest challenges rather, going forward? There are several, and you must be under a lot of pressure. It must be your most high-profile assignment till date.
I think, look, Sonali, we've been here in the country since 2006. So I think, as in any organization that has reached a certain scale and impact of this order, many teams over many years have worked to kind of get us to this place. I think you're alluding to 3 years ago, we clearly called out India as an important country. We are a standalone region that works directly with global, and all of the products and functions come together. I think it was a nod, and that structure exists only for India. And I think that was a nod, not to me, but I think it was a nod to the distinctiveness of India as a country for us.
Sure.
And that continues. I see this as a fairly big canvas where I think the company has a huge opportunity to continue to have big impact in India. I think you asked the question in terms of what are the issues or problems we face. Yeah. I don't see it that way, Sonali. I see it as this is a country that is in the middle of this remarkable transformation where technology is playing a huge role. It's having an impact on the economy. It's having an impact on how communities are being built, how friends and families are connecting. And look at it. I mean, I think a company that has Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, I think it's a huge privilege. And I think all of the work that we have done in the last 3 years, whether it is to fuel the agenda of expression that is translated in a product like Reels on Instagram, where there is no question that the success of Reels in India, but India championing the shape of Instagram and Reels globally, the early experiments that we're doing with payments on WhatsApp, the work we're doing with small businesses. I do think while the pandemic was unfortunate, it's hard to think about going through the pandemic and all of the changes that it has caused without our platforms playing the role that they play in India. And therefore, I look at this as it's a canvas to play a useful role in a country which is in the middle of this huge transformation where digital has a role to play, and where we have the privilege of platforms which people love and use every day. And I think that canvas continues to be pretty big.
I would be curious to know how Facebook is defining itself. For instance, are you looking at yourself as a publisher? Are you looking at yourself as a tech company, social tech company? Because are you supposed to be moderating stuff, whether it's hate or whether I should take the vaccine or not, right? I'm just saying. Or, so are you expected to by governments around the world to be moderating content? And if you are moderating content, whose morality are you using as a yardstick?
Great question, and so many things packed in there. So if I can unpack it, Sonali. We are a social technology company, and in some ways, I think the new identity of Meta and the articulation of all the efforts that we're going to make over the next 5 to 10 years gives us clarity on who we are, right? We still believe in the power of people to bring communities together, for businesses to leverage the power of communities to grow. So the inherent essence of who we are is a social technology company. Now, to your question on moderation, I think your question is less about our identity, but more about law and the structure of law.
Yeah.
And I think there are a few things to call out here. One, I do think we have a role to play in the agenda of fueling expression. I think we are a platform that can bring in diverse voices and that can further the agenda of inclusion in India. And that agenda continues. We have articulated what we call the community standards, which are essentially our guidelines articulated over years of work and that we continue to refine with inputs from governments, civil society and stakeholders to your question, to define what is not allowed on the platform. Yeah. For example, you cannot incite violence using our platform. So the community standards are articulated transparently. I don't think it is judged on the morality of any individual or a company. I think it is an aggregation of everything we have learned, including inputs from governments, while at the same time, I think to the question that you asked, India's legal framework allows us to do that. In fact, requires us to do that. If you look at the IT Act, which recognizes our status as an intermediary, meaning we are a platform where others express themselves versus a publisher who creates content of its own, even as it provides protection for us to enable the expression of others as an intermediary, right. It also imposes the onus on us to make sure that we are making best efforts to reduce harm. So the law is entirely consistent with what we are doing. So we are an intermediary. We do have a transparent community standard, which is essentially our expression of what can be done on the platform, which put limits to what can be done, largely aimed at preventing bad actors from causing harm on our platform. And that is consistent with India's legal framework. In fact, when the new IT rules were introduced earlier this year, Sonali, we were one of the companies that were vocal right off the bat in saying we respect Indian law and we are going to find a way to comply with the newer rules that were introduced. So I think these coexist. We have the obligation to make sure that we are reducing harm on our platform. And if you ask, I'm not a lawyer, but if you ask lawyers and people who know the IT Act, they'll tell you that not only should you do it, you're required to do it, even as an intermediary. And I think we're also very clear that we respect Indian law.
Fair enough, but my point is, it's a gray area on what is hate speech or what is not healthy to be heard. For instance, this is just an example, it's a hypothetical. If I had to voice views which were anti-establishment, right, and there were pages that were there, just like you have the Bhakt pages, or you have people supporting the government very staunchly, there could be pages which are also anti-establishment. Similarly, another totally diverse example would be vaccines. While the whole world, and I know the founder himself is promoting vaccines, there could be a point of view about the efficacy of vaccines and if there's enough research been done on it. But these are all expressions, right? Freedom of expression. Are you, as Facebook, being obligated to follow the government's narratives across the world, not just in India? Because it's also a tightrope to be walking. Would you be pulled up if there were people who were commenting against the government?
Not at all. And I've said this before, and I think it's important that there are a couple of things here, right? One, we follow the law, and the law has clearly articulated processes for taking down content on platforms like us, right? I think there's a process established in the IT Act, and we follow it when we get legal orders. Sure. Equally, we are transparent about the community guidelines, the community standards. So, and it's a document that keeps evolving based on inputs from experts and governments and other stakeholders, including, I think, because you brought up the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020, the arrival of vaccines late last year, early this year. I think we are using inputs from public health experts around the world to figure out how should we evolve our policies to make sure that we are playing a positive role, right? I think these are all complex issues.
Yeah, of course.
Our natural inclination is to allow the widest expression on our platforms, Sonali, and that's true in India, it's true around the world. But at the same time, if there are constraints on that, on the back of people causing harm, or on the back of an involved public health discussion involving experts from around the world, and their considered judgment is if there is expression on the platform that says, you can drink something toxic to cure coronavirus, yes, I do think we take a call that we won't allow the dissemination of that. I think it's the right call to make. And equally, I think on a lot of framing that we use, we don't apply the lens of is it pro-establishment or anti-establishment, is it pro-government or anti-government. I think it is it consistent with the community standards that we have outlined, and is it consistent with local law? And I think that gives us clarity. And whenever new issues like the health associated questions that came up on the back of COVID-19 18 months ago, our inclination is to pull in as many experts who are spending a lot of time deeply on these topics and use their guidance and use the guidance of governments around the world to figure out where do we draw the line on expression. And I think that's the right way to do it.
When I met you in 2019 in Bombay, you just started a very aggressive movement in consumer marketing, and you had Avinash also join you. How is that effort panned out? Because we have seen many campaigns that you're looking to actually make an impact with the larger audience of India. How is that actually? How would you rate the efficacy of that?
I remember that conversation, Sonali, and I remember telling you that one of the things that we need to do is to tell our story better.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we have done in the last 3 years, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. They play such an enormously positive role in India. We thought there was an opportunity to tell that story ourselves, and I think we have done that. We have also used it at different points to introduce people to newer products and features, whether it's watch on Facebook or payments on WhatsApp, and we'll continue to do that as well. But I do think there's an opportunity that we have to tell the story of what's happening in India with all the people in different parts of the country who are using our platforms, and to have that story reflected in our own story, because that's the role that we play.
And you think it's work in progress, or you think, in the last 2 years you've done quite a good job in telling your story and actually, changing somewhat the narrative?
I think it's definitely a work in progress, but I also think we have done tremendous work in telling the story ourselves. But I think we have to continue to do that, and I think the power of this is the role that our platforms are playing every day. We are able to tell our story because there's a story of people who are using Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp every day, and those stories are positive. Those stories are stories of impact, and we'll continue to do that.
WhatsApp Pay, I know lots has happened since our last conversation. You've piloted it and you're testing it. Where are we on that, and when is it going to be, widely available for people to use?
I think it's a great question. We just got approval from NPCI, where the cap on the number of people who can use WhatsApp Pay was raised from 20 million to 40 million. So we do think there's an opportunity for us now to start scaling it, for it to have wider impact. The opportunity on payments on WhatsApp remains what it was when we spoke last as well, Sonali, which is you have a payments rail like UPI, which is unique to India, which has been enormously successful, and it has brought in the first 150 million people onto payments in India, and that's truly transformed payments in the country. The opportunity that we see with WhatsApp, given its scale, given the way in which it's used in India, is to take the agenda of financial inclusion deep into India. right? Can we essentially bring the unbanked or people who are not using digital payments a lot into the UPI ecosystem? And that agenda covers hundreds of millions of people. So you're right in calling out that we have barely started on this journey, given the opportunity that WhatsApp has to really light up the agenda of financial inclusion in India. It's been almost more than a year, I think, since we got approval.
Yeah.
We're being cautious. I think we're being deliberate that we build a product where payments is as easy as it is to send messages. And what that means is, from a product point of view, and I think you've seen this from WhatsApp over the years, is that we are fairly conservative in terms of making sure that the experience is so elegant, it's so intuitive, that anyone can use it.
Sure.
So there's a lot of hard work, a lot of pilots going on to understand what works in India. Recently, we introduced the rupee sign on payments on WhatsApp. We're going to do this deliberately. We know that there are companies that have been really successful on payments, and they continue to be. It's extremely competitive. But we think if we do it steadily, if we get it right in terms of building a product that is very easy to use, not just for 100 million people, but 500 million people, we can play a huge role in bringing a lot of people into the cashless way of living, and really expand the fruits of going digital and going cashless to all of India. And that's the big goal that we're chasing.
But what will be the timeline?
I think we're okay to take a bit more time.
Yeah.
I know media is getting impatient.
No,
I get
aren't
asked.
you insecure that the later you launch, payment UPIs that are already existing are getting, stronger by the day?
And I think, just like in most spaces that we play in, whether it's social media or messaging or short form video, these spaces are inherently competitive. But I think it's more important for us to get it right, and to trust that for a company that has built a product that is used by 2 billion people around the world, hundreds of millions in India, that when we get it right, and if we really solve for not the top 100 million people, but all of the people who've come online in India, will be able to add value. I think that's sort of the big opportunity and canvas for us. And if it takes a bit more time than what the media is used to, I think we're okay with that.
There's been a lot of talk about, Facebook getting into sporting events. And of course, you must have heard, lots has been reported of the fact that you might be bidding for IPL. Also, given your Hotstar background, putting that together gives it even more credibility. But is that actually true? Are you looking at bidding for IPL?
Look, IPL, I had the opportunity to play a role when I was at Hotstar. If anything, what the history of the last 12 or 13 years shows is that this is a tournament that will keep getting bigger. I think there's such massive followership. I think Hotstar played a huge role in building that followership. We have a partnership with the ICC, as you know, that extends through the World Cup in India in 2023. Look, I think, Sonali, the truth is that we play a role in building followership on cricket, in driving conversations around cricket. And we saw that even at the recently concluded World Cup in UAE, across Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. And that doesn't necessarily require us to have live broadcast rights. I think where we have opportunities to partner with the BCCI or the ICC, we will grab those opportunities. We think we have a role in fueling conversations around cricket, in continuing to build followership around cricket, and that will continue, I think, irrespective of the outcome of the broadcast rights.
Okay, fair enough. Last question before I let you go. I know I've overstepped my time. You've talked about Meta, you've talked about metaverse. When is it that we in India, who are users of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, will actually, have some feel of what we're going to see in the future?
I think that's a great question, and my answer is it's now, because it's not a moment in time when sort of this world gets unveiled. I think it's going to be built incrementally over a period of time, and we are absolutely convinced, Sonali, that companies in India, startups that have not been formed yet, developers. I think just given the enormous tech capacity in India, developers will have a huge role in shaping and building and nurturing the different blocks that will form the metaverse. So that work is already on, and I think India will play a huge role in shaping it. I think as a company, given all of what we spoke about, we are clear that we have a role both in the introduction of products and technologies that we are building, like Quest, but equally in sparking ideas in India that will allow India to play a lot more of a leadership role in shaping the metaverse than it did in shaping this version of the internet.
Sure.
With all the action that came about in the late 90s. I do think given where we are, given all of the energy we're seeing, given the explosive growth of entrepreneurship in the country, and fundamentally the engineering and product manager and developer capacity in India, I think our role is to make sure that we can do as much as we can to ensure that India plays a central role in shaping the future of the metaverse.
Fair enough. Thank you so much for your time, Ajit. Thank you for patiently answering my questions and being as candid as you possibly can. Thank you so much. Truly
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Great being here, Sonali.